Welcome back. On track at the moment, Ragtime Racers in action. But before Tom McIntyre goes, I would be remiss if I wasn't to tell our audience about the car that you will be pedaling later in the day. One of my favourites, and as a Trans Am man, I don't know all my historic Trans Am cars, but I do know about the number 6 Penske. Tell me about it.
And it's just, when you sit behind the wheel of these cars, it's wonderful to feel the same thing that the original drivers felt. These cars are all restored to perfection. They're not copies, they're not reproductions, they're the real cars that you would have seen here between 1966 and 72.
Well, that coming up, and that is going to be a highlight for me anyway, and I'm sure some of the fans around the world watching around the world. My thanks for Tom coming in, and we'll see you later. Please come in afterwards. I'd love to hear how it goes on the new surface.
Wonderful.
And see if you put some extra quick laps in the old girl. But thanks for coming in. We've got it fast and furious as we turn our attention now to the Ragtime Racers. Going to tell you all about that. My thanks, Tom. Appreciate you coming in.
Thanks for having me.
So, as you can see, as I mentioned, we've got Ragtime Racers on track, and I'm going to introduce another man. Well, he's not really from the era, but he may as well be, because he knows all about racing. James Alder's going to join me in a moment to talk about some of these guys. But the Ragtime Racers is a very special group. And before we get down to the nitty-gritty, let's head down to Kev Harris. What have you got, Kev?
Lovely, thanks, Johnny. I'm down here with the man that makes the Ragtime Races all possible, Brian Blaine. And Brian, it's great to see you once again. We've met on a few occasions now, and usually I'm dressed up like you. But look at what's going on behind us. You're doing the skit here where the car's late to the line. Oh, Beauregard, he's late again, isn't he?
Beauregard's always late, always late. You know, it's almost dependable that he's not going to make it on time.
But just tell us about what's going on, because basically one of your old-time racers here, they find a skunk in the gearbox or something.
Yeah, we find the skunk, and it catches on fire. He finds the skunk, takes it out, puts the car back together. And we've had so much fun doing this over the years. There have been a number of people who have taken cars apart, put them back together, but not running, and then back together running again with the engine out.
This is what amazes me, Brian. This car, you take it fully apart, you put it back together, you turn the key or press the button, and it just, fingers crossed, it goes. And it usually does go. But whose idea was this? And this in itself is a great piece of engineering to make this happen.
Well, Beauregard and I did this. We were a part of a local Model T club that was trying to break the world's record on taking a car apart and putting it back together. We decided, well, let's go one further. Let's have it running, take it apart, put it back together again, fire it back up. And we started doing this in front of the bleachers at race events. And it's been so popular that we just keep doing it. But the engineering of it is quite involved, because it's not a car that is just starting up for a few seconds. It's got full water, full of fuel, full of everything. We've actually taken it, and after we've done this, we took it around the Indy Oval. So it's a real running car when it's back together.
It is a real running car, made of period parts as well that they're putting back together here. But let's just talk about the Ragtime Racers for a moment, because these are the cars from the early 1900s that were racing around tracks, all over the United States of America.
That's right. This is the beginning, and it's unfortunate, but when I started messing with these old cars 30 years ago, I realized that we'd forgotten about them. I was racing a Can-Am car. Who cares about these old things? And then I got hooked on them, and I found out that we've almost lost a part of our history. And so ever since then, I've been trying to get these guys to bring their cars out of their collections or out of their garage or out of the barn, get them running, and bring them out on the track so people can see them. And the key to this is we don't ever take these cars to events unless we can fire them up, run them around a track. We want people to see what it was like 100 years ago racing cars.
And it's fantastic, and that is exactly what you do here at Laguna Seca. I mean, I've seen Ed Archer with his old Ford Model T over there race around here, and he's doing 60, 70, 80 miles an hour in a car that he's sitting up high and proud in, and you've got to pump those brakes to get them braking when you go down that corkscrew.
Yeah, when it comes to brakes, if you want to stop the car today, you better put the brakes on yesterday.
That's exactly it. But we're coming to the closing stages now of the skit here, where the guys have taken it apart and putting it back together. How many minutes do they do this in? Because it's a full strip down and then put back together, and then, like you said, it's going on the track.
Their record is 8 minutes and a few seconds, and I don't remember exactly, but they're doing pretty good today. They might break the record today.
Yeah, they might do. And what happens is, if you've never seen this before, if you're watching somewhere around the world right now, there's a whole sort of bit of pantomime, if you will, that the cars are going out to the track, and this one says, oh, it won't start, there's an issue. And then the guys strip it down, and they discover the issue, and it is a skunk in the gearbox that they find, isn't it?
Yes, it is. They find the skunk. And once they find the skunk, they usually toss it to the paddock marshal, which scares him away. And, of course, the paddock marshal is part of the show.
Yeah. And I think the great thing about this is, now I've seen this about 3 times now, 4 times maybe, but there are people who come to these shows year on year, and they don't know about it until it starts to happen. They think this is actually for real, right?
We've had some really interesting things. The first year we did this up at Sonoma, we had somebody come up afterwards and they said, we're making a formal protest because after you guys got this back together, they wouldn't let you take it on the track. Well, I told them, don't let him on the track. He can't make it around there. He doesn't have enough fuel in the tank. But this person was so upset that they had worked so hard and they wouldn't let him on the track that they filed an official protest.
There you go. That is acting of the highest degree. That is with the pantomime. That is, art imitating life or something. But we're getting the stage now. The bodywork is going back on. But just a quick word about the event then, Brian. Like you said, it's all about preserving history. And when you look at these cars, these are historic, early 1900s. But we're getting to an era where a car from the 80s is vintage, and historic now as well. And we got to preserve all of them.
Yeah, and they're disappearing at a rapid rate. The real early ones just don't exist. Trying to find 20 or 30 of these cars that are actually in running condition and can drive on a track at speed just doesn't exist anymore. They're gone, and we don't want that to happen to the cars from the 60s.
No, exactly. And when you drive around the roads these days, I'm obviously in the UK, you're over here in the US, what we class as old cars, you don't see many old cars on the road anymore, which is a shame.
Yeah, and when as a kid, we would try and identify every car as it went by. Nowadays, they all look the same.
They do. They're all out the wind tunnel. They're all like hybrid, or they're going to be electric. It's the way of the world. But like you say, they all look the same. But look, here we go. Let's just bring you around here, Brian, because the finale is almost upon us. The car was stripped down. It's been put back together. The skunk has been removed from the engine box or the gearbox, wherever it was. The guys are about to put the bonnet on. The moment of truth is upon us. They have done this in around 8 minutes, and I think they deserve a huge round of applause if this thing fires up first time. We talk about modern engineering, but look what you've done here with old engineering. This is going to go. Come on. Check a plug, check a plug. Look at this, though. It did fire up. Come on, we got this. Go, 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 says Beauregard Speedwell. The guy's a little bit of a spray. Yes, come on, yes, yes. Right, listen, Brian, thank you ever so much. Car 13 rolls towards the grid, and you're going to roll and go and join our Johnny Green in the announcer booth and add some life to this. Is that right?
I'll be there in a quick 5.
He'll be there in a quick 5. There you go, Johnny. Brian is on his way up to you. What a great show, folks. How about that?
So, those magnificent men in their flying machines, quite literally. This is a great example. I love ragtime races. This is just pure fun, and they have fun doing it, but there's a very serious connotation to it because you genuinely are witnessing a little bit of history here. This is how it was done. This is the likes of the Model T Ford of 1920, Mark Hart at the wheel of that one, and the Packards out there. We've got Nationals, speed cars out there from 1912. We've got a Hall Scott Model M from 1970. Tom Malloy's out there in that Locomobile Model I from 1908. Folks, this is where it all began, and this is where the technology that you see We just saw the most modern Corvette in the world in the future. Well, this is kind of where it all began. And two-seaters, why two seats, you say? Why did you have to have an extra guy? Well, somebody had to start the thing, and somebody had to be the spotter. So the man who isn't at the wheel, or the woman that isn't at the wheel, is doing just that, using a balancing act as well as being the starter, the mechanic, and keeping an eye out for those. It wasn't pressurizing the fuel system. It wasn't until the Marm and Wasp went to the Indy 500 and put a mirror on that he did away with a passenger. And you can see that just ahead is one passengerless car. That's the number 9 coming through shot there. And a beautiful sight, absolutely gorgeous, and I really do enjoy these guys. They've been, that's a Franklin Desert Racer that's in action there. And the 21, that's a Hudson from 1916. So a real display and exhibition. This is not a race, this is just a little bit of fun, but some serious fun too, because you really do get the lineage. We've got cars that go back to 27 in our normal groups, but this is kind of an anomaly group, the Ragtime races, and they've been doing this around, as you heard there with Kev, around the United States now for quite some time, and they put on a real show, including that exhibition you just saw. And I'm just about to get rejoined by the same man. Here he comes into the booth. But I was just saying, you know, when this is an anomaly group because you're not actually racing, but at the same time, a very important group for people to understand. If I were bringing my little Larry son, of, let's say 12 years old, he'd never been to one of these events, I'd want him to see this and say, this is, you know, it's all very well being excited about the Corvette in the future. This is where it all began.
This is the beginning. That's right. And if we lose the beginning, then then where are we? But you know, you're talking about this, the cars racing. They're actually driving at racing speed.
Yes.
But they're not racing for position. They're not taking any chances because they're not wearing safety gear other than a helmet. And some of them are they're all amateur drivers. Some are pro.
What sort of speeds are we doing then?
Yeah. And
I've actually been in the two-seater at Sonoma in one of these, and I was amazed at the sheer speed that we were doing.
We have so much fun with, you know, I've raced everything from Formula One, Can-Am, Vintage, and it's a kick to have people walk up and make fun of the cars, and then I take them out with me. And I say, and after, when they come back in, they have a new understanding of what it feels like to go 80 miles an hour, you know, in a car that's like sitting in a lawn chair in the back of a pickup truck.
It really is, and it feels like that. You feel like you're in a no-suspension pickup truck, and you are hanging on for dear life if you're a passenger. But it's gleeful, it's joyful, it's absolutely wind in your hair fun.
Yeah, it's amazing if you think about it. I took the number 20 National that ran at Indy in 1911 for the Centennial. They let me take a lap around Indy's Oval in 2011, and that car supposedly did a 100-mile-an-hour lap back in 2011. And after they let me take it out, no other traffic, I did a 100-mile-an-hour lap around Indy. When I came in after 3 laps, I couldn't hang on to the steering wheel because the vibration made my arms numb. My eyes were bouncing around, my teeth were chattering, you know, from the vibration. And then I thought, when that track was brick,
yes,
in 1911,
it
was a 7.5-hour race.
I mean, you'd have to wear a gum shield.
Those guys were tough. You know, they were farm boys. They chopped wood by hand. You know, they climb in a race car. You know, I hate to say it, but I think a lot of the training that our Formula One drivers get nowadays probably would not be adequate for a 7.5-hour race in one of these cars.
I can well imagine. And what are they like to wheel? I mean, physically, I would have thought they're a handful.
They are. The steering is very, very heavy. So it's definitely a two-handed steering. You've got to have both a handbrake and a foot brake, and neither of them work worth a darn because they only work on the rear wheel. So you use them both simultaneously, and then you got to let go of the brake, grab the hand shifter real quick. So they are a handful to drive.
I mentioned that we're looking at the National IndyCar Model 40 from 1911, going through its paces there, and the number 20 just going up the corkscrew.
That's the car that ran at Indy in 1911, finished 7th.
It's amazing, absolutely amazing. And here we are, this many years on and we're still going around. That's what blows my head off. It's just the fact that it's possible. I just can't think of another sport where this is the maintaining, the love, all the rest of it. The whole Scott Model M just passed through there. But is there a favorite? I was talking about how some of the innovations that came from these early cars, and I mentioned the Marm and Wasp, about how that was the first use of a rear view mirror.
Right.
And so, you know, you talk about the development, the history of racing, and how each innovation changed the sport and changed the automobile use by us, mere mortals. But these are important times for the development.
And, you know, 1 or 2 years back at the turn of the century was like 1 or 2 decades.
Right.
Because the innovations were coming so fast. The automobile was brand new. Internal combustion engines were brand new.
Not many people could get their hands on them.
They couldn't get their hands on it. But, I mean, the thought that you had cars experimenting with overhead cam engines, you had cars experimenting with different types of combustion chambers. Back then, nobody knew what was best.
Well, listen, we're going to take a short break. More action coming up. The Ragtime races will be in action later in the weekend. My thanks for coming in. Again, you're always welcome. We want to talk cars. We want to talk history. That's what it's all about here at the Rolex Monterey Motorsports Reunion. We'll be right back.